Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be on with you. I hope the Hewitt family and all of your listeners had a blessed Easter weekend.
We did indeed, and they're mourning at Gonzaga, but they're celebrating throughout Texas this morning. Never, ever, Senator Cotton, let yourself get on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Will you promise me that?
I don't think with my sports abilities these days, I'm at risk of being on the cover of any sporting magazine.
Yeah, you and me both. I got it. By the way, speaking of sports, if you had to name the least woke place in America, wouldn't it be Augusta National Golf Course?
Well, that's only if Rob Manfred does what he should do if he wants to stick by his virtue signaling via his job, which is not only refuse to attend the Masters tournament this week, but also resign his membership at Augusta to continue his boycott of Georgia and, frankly, encourage Augusta to replace him with a woman or a minority. Now,
absolutely
tells you that Rob Manfred will be a little more discerning and a little more deliberate when it comes to his own preferences and his own comforts and his own prestige with his membership at Augusta than he was with the institution he leads, Major League Baseball.
Yeah, they've also gone to the dope capital of the world. They have moved the Major League Baseball to Colorado, which they think of as woke because of their dope policy, but I don't think he's looked at their open carry laws in Colorado much. The anti-gun people are not going to like that one. I mean, you can't win with woke.
Well, also, Hugh, so it is true that Colorado is a very strong Second Amendment state. But also, if I'm not mistaken, Hugh, I think it takes a photo ID to vote in person in Colorado.
It does.
I don't know what version of Jim Crow this is, but, according to Joe Biden and Stacey Abrams, Georgia is responsible for Jim Crow 2.0. So I think Delaware, Joe Biden's state, must be Jim Crow 3.0 since they don't have any early voting, and they get many fewer drop boxes than Georgia does now. And I think they require photo ID. So I guess Colorado would be Jim Crow 4.0 by the Democrats' ridiculous standards.
It is, and I noticed that the leader, McConnell, and other Republicans are out there saying this isn't going to fly. We, corporate America, and United Airlines went woke today, too. I don't know what's up with United Airlines. I don't boycott people. I just make choices when I can make. I don't have to buy Major League Baseball tickets and equipment and merch. I'm not going to. I don't have to fly Delta except in rare cases. I'm not going to. I'm going to fly a different. That just impacts my choice, and it's too bad because most people I know working for the airlines, the pilots and the stewards, they are very center right. I mean, I get so many people talking to me on airlines. I do not know what's going on at headquarters, but it is not the people who fly and attend to me on the airplane.
So, Hugh, I think there's a couple things going on with these politically correct corporations and CEOs. One is they're responding to their fears. A lot of these companies, I would point out, have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party because they want access to the Chinese market or they want to outsource jobs there. So Delta is in partnership with a Chinese communist-owned airline. And Coca-Cola, of all things, was aggressively lobbying last year in Congress against a bill to punish China for its use of slave labor by religious minorities. And Major League Baseball is increasingly entwined with the communist regime in China and, of course, has long been entwined with the communist regime in Cuba. And they're scared of those communists in those countries because they know that they will cut them off. I think they're also scared of the radical left-wing mobs in America because they know that those mobs, both inside their companies and outside their companies, will target them for campaigns of harassment and boycotts and so forth. So I think they're responding to their cowardly fears. Now, Hugh, one way to counteract that pressure inside these companies is for conservative employees to make their voices heard. As you said, there are thousands and thousands of conservative Republicans who work for Delta, American, and United. And I've met dozens of them over the years who have recognized me when I'm flying back and forth from Arkansas to Washington. Gate agents, pilots, flight attendants, they thank me for my service in the Senate. They said they support what I'm trying to accomplish. They even, Hugh, committed what the left-wing mob would view as a cardinal sin of saying they supported Donald Trump as well.
Yep.
So these CEOs, like the Coke CEO and Delta CEO, sitting in their gleaming headquarters in Atlanta, surrounded by social justice MBAs straight out of the Ivy League, hear all the time from their left-wing employees. So if you're a mechanic at Delta or you're a factory worker at Coca-Cola or you're a pilot at Delta, you should just send off an email. Send an email to your CEO. Send an email to your chief diversity officer and tell them what you think about these things. And more to the point, if you work at other companies that haven't taken these steps but are being pressured to take these steps, you should make your voice heard. Make sure that your CEO knows that he doesn't speak for all of his employees when he takes the far left position on these issues.
Now, I'd like to suggest that you work with one of your old law professors. I know that Elizabeth Warren was your law professor, right? And she was a pretty good professor. And
much better professor than she is a senator.
Exactly. But she'd
probably say I was a much better student than I am a senator, and I wasn't a very good student.
I'm sure that's a bit, but I mean, you do have the HLS together, and you ought to go down and sit down and talk about shareholder rights. And let's see if we can't get a suit available to shareholders who are looking at United today and seeing their very woke 2.0 statement about our mission is to unite the world. I thought their mission was to get me from L.A. to D.C., but they've expanded their mission to save the world. Can't you and Senator Warren sit down and write some shareholder protection against the politicization of corporate America?
Well, I'm not sure that Liz Warren has much interest in protecting shareholders or anyone else who owns a single asset in America. If you look at some of the Democrats'
You're probably right.
Plan, but I will say this, Hugh. Another point is, who cares what all these CEOs think? Who appointed them moral arbiters of our political order? I mean, these CEOs run an airline. They sell sugary beverages. They run a credit card company. They run a drug company. They're not the Pope. They're not a bishop. They're not head of a Protestant convention. They certainly didn't put their name on the ballot and ask their fellow citizens to elect them to help make laws to govern our country. They are business executives, and they have no special claim to knowledge or moral virtue any more than those mechanics or pilots or flight attendants or gate agents who are conservative Republicans. So how about they just stick to doing their job as opposed to expressing uninformed, politically correct decisions about how we should order political affairs in our country?
Well, I agree with that. I also have a theory as to why they're acting this way, Senator. If you saw the 60 Minutes attempted hit on Ron DeSantis, another Harvard Law graduate, it teaches you, one, don't go after a Harvard Law graduate who's got the microphone. It also teaches you, number two, it would be better if Piggly Wiggly were in Florida, because then it would have been funnier. Have you got Piggly Wiggly in Arkansas?
We do have a few Piggly Wigglies, not many. It's Piggly Wiggly is more of a kind of a southeast franchise. So in the southern and eastern parts of Arkansas, we have a few.
Wouldn't it have been great if the 60 Minutes reporter had said, we have a pay-for-play scandal involving Piggly Wiggly? It would have just been hilarious. But
it would have been amusing to hear some 60 Minutes correspondents having to say Piggly Wiggly dozens of times over.
I know. They're so self-important. It was hilarious. And DeSantis took them apart with a scalpel, and then they ran it anyway. It was though they thought nobody will notice that we've edited. I mean, what do you make of a network that is that deeply in the thrall of a narrative that they will make it up?
Well, that's a lot of where the deep blue media has gone over the last 5 years, and Donald Trump's departure from Washington certainly hasn't changed any. Some of the things we've been discussing, Hugh, are questions not even being asked. Where's the New York Times? Where's CNN asking Rob Manfred if he's going to resign his membership at Augusta National and make his boycott of Georgia personal, not just convenient through his corporation? Where are they asking the Coke CEO if, for instance, he's lobbying Boris Johnson in his native country to have any kind of early voting? So they diminish stories they don't like. If they can't find stories that are critical of conservatives, sometimes they'll just make stories up.
And they did that at 60 Minutes. I got to ask you about the reconciliation ruling yesterday. I began the show by pointing out we have a $28 trillion debt, which is 133% of the GDP. In 1980, it was 35% of the GDP. Now we have given Chuck Schumer the keys to the kingdom. How significant is yesterday's ruling by the parliamentarian, or do you think maybe we're getting one side of the story?
Well, Hugh, I think that sound you hear all across America is people turning the dial to the right when you start talking about Senate floor procedure. But I will say this could be important. That is true, because procedure can often lead to genuine results in the law. I will say this. We certainly only heard one side of the story. Chuck Schumer put out a statement last night purporting to represent what our parliamentarian had told him about the ability to pass multiple bills at a simple majority threshold without 60 votes related to taxes and spending. Typically, the way this works is the parliamentarian will work with the two sides, and they'll go through negotiations and arguments, almost like not quite a courtroom argument, but let's say arbitration, and then she'll provide a ruling to both sides. Sometimes that's made public, sometimes it's not. So until we actually know what our parliamentarian has said, until we understand the exact contours of it, I think it's premature to reach definitive conclusions based solely on Chuck Schumer's press release. I will say this, though, Hugh. Chuck Schumer's effort to try to get multiple bites at the taxing and spending apple just shows you, one, how unpopular their agenda is, because they don't even try to get Republican support for it, and two, the fact that they want more of your money so they can spend more of your money. And that's the Democratic ambition, and that's the essence of their agenda.
Is there no center left? I mean, Joe Manchin is holding the line. Is it just Joe Manchin between us and a $50 trillion debt? Is he the only thing left?
I don't think he's the only thing, at least not right now. I mean, you kind of saw on the minimum wage issue when the rubber hit the road last month, and there was finally a vote on Bernie Sanders' $15 an hour minimum wage, that 8 Democrats voted against it, even though only 2 Democrats have been outspoken against it. So there may be more division and more fear inside the Democratic caucus than is apparent based on pursuing the very unpopular policies of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders.
Last question. Does anyone talk about the danger of inflation, Senator? You weren't even born, I don't think, when I bought my first house for 12.5% interest rate over a 30-year. Honestly, do they not know what inflation does to people?
So I think a lot of people in Washington, Hugh, believe that inflation has been predicted 9 of the last 2 times it occurred. And especially since the 2007-2008 recession, that people have been predicting inflation and it hasn't happened. What worries me now is that it's not just potential increased demand and increased money supply, but there are still significant supply constraints, Hugh. And those are circumstances that are more ripe for inflation than we've seen in 14 years. I mean, anyone who's trying to buy a home or remodel a home right now knows that prices are sky high, that delays are very long because you can't get lumber, you can't get copper, you can't even get tar for the roof. And that is magnified across every sector of the economy as we're still dealing with the supply shocks of the shutdowns of the last year and the coronavirus's impact on manufacturing and production. So at a time when you have increasing demand as we come out of those shutdowns and the money supply is growing and stagnant or even decreasing supply in many vital goods, the conditions are ripe for inflation. I hope we don't have that. One way to make sure we don't have it is for Congress not to have another $2 trillion budget blowout.
I hope people heard that. I'm going to print that. I'm going to post that. Thank you, Senator Cotton. Have a good day.